They found her kneeling beside the fire, hair tangled with pine needles, her voice raw from singing. In her lap lay the body of an Apache youth, pale as ash, lips parted like he was still listening. The wind tore through the canyon, scattering embers, but she didn't flinch. She just kept singing, low, broken, like a prayer only ghosts could answer. 50 warriors stood in a silent circle around her. None spoke. None moved. They'd ridden all night across blood-wet land, chasing rumors of a white woman with a voice that could bring back the dead. The boy at her feet had been their youngest, their drummer, shot in the back near Painted Ridge, and somehow he'd come back long enough to weep. The oldest warrior stepped forward, took off his war bonnet, and placed it beside the fire. No words, just reverence, a kind of mourning, or maybe awe. She kept, singing until dawn painted the cliffs red, and when she finally looked up, the warriors weren't there to kill her. They were there to listen. Before we jump back in, introduce yourself and let me know where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Dust. Hollow wasn't on any maps, not the ones folks trusted anyhow. It sat hunched at the edge of the Badger Hills, half swallowed by cottonwood trees and red clay. When the wind blew wrong, you could hear it, an old weather vane squealing like it didn't want to tell you which way the world was turning. The town looked like it had given up midway through being born. A leaning church, a saloon that never closed, and a general store with boards so warped they bowed like old men's knees. Folks didn't wave much. They didn't smile either. They stared. Through windows, around corners, from behind nailed-up shutters. And they whispered. Always whispered. Especially when she passed. Her name was Evelyn Calloway, and she walked with a limp that made her look like she'd been stitched back together wrong. Her left leg dragged slightly behind the right, boots scuffing the dust in a way that made children stop playing marbles mid-toss. Some said she'd been kicked by a horse. Others claimed she'd been caught in a prairie fire and didn't die fast enough. But the real story was worse, and no one ever said it above a whisper. Evelyn had come from the east with a husband and a hope. He was a stonemason, all jawline and quiet hands. Built the courthouse steps in town, hung the bell in the chapel, then got shot in the throat 3 weeks later by a drifter who never even looked back. She never cried where anyone could see, just walked home with blood on her dress and silence in her eyes. She buried him herself, dug the hole with that limp leg dragging behind, refusing help from even the pastor. From that day on, no one knocked at her door. She kept the old cabin, on the edge of town, just past the cedar grove. Close enough to see Dust Hollow's spire when the sun hit it right, but far enough that no one came calling without a reason. And no one ever had a reason. She taught herself to live with ghosts. The wind in the chimney, the crackle of a candle, the occasional creek fox prowling too close to the root cellar. Her voice, once soft and steady, had become a stranger to her own ears. She barely used it. Not when no one was listening. Not when no one cared. She wasn't born with that voice, though. She'd earned it. Back before the accident, before her, limp before the town froze her out, Evelyn had sung at every church gathering. Folks came early just to hear her warm up. Some said she could shatter glass if she wanted. Others said she'd once made a baby stop crying just by humming near its cradle. Now, she didn't sing. Not in town, not to anyone. But the hills remembered. The land remembered, and someone else had too. It started the night of the thunderstorm, 2 weeks before they found her singing over the dead Apache boy. A hard wind had battered Dust Hollow, slapping windows and tearing the sign clean off the saloon. Evelyn had just finished chopping firewood when she heard it. A low, pulsing drum beat echoing from beyond the tree line. It was faint, nearly drowned out by thunder. But it wasn't thunder. Not quite. She ignored it. She always ignored things that felt like they might wake her grief. But the next night, it came again. Drums. Slow. Measured. Like someone was marking time for a funeral procession only the wind could see. And this time, she answered. Not with words, but with a note. A single note, held in her throat until it trembled. It wasn't conscious. It wasn't planned. It slipped out like breath in cold air, visible for a moment, then gone. But it was enough. The next morning, she found a strip of leather tied to her fence post. Apache beading, red and white. Symbols she didn't understand, but felt in her chest like a warning. Or maybe an invitation. She didn't tell anyone. They wouldn't have listened. They never did. By the fourth night, she was singing again. In the cabin. Into the dark. Her voice climbed the beams and curled through the cracks in the shutters like smoke. And someone was listening. Tracks appeared in the dirt. Too small for a man, too large for a child. A pattern, back and forth, like someone pacing, undecided. One morning she found a woven bracelet on her doorstep. Apache child's work. She didn't touch it, but she didn't throw it away either. Something was coming, something old. And Evelyn, who had been alone for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to be watched with kindness, began to leave her door slightly ajar when she sang. Just a crack. Enough for a voice to slip through if it needed to. Enough for a ghost to listen. She wasn't afraid. She'd already lost everything that could be taken. What could death do now but sit and stay a while? Before we dive deeper into the story, just a quick note. I'm Thomas, the voice behind this narration. If you enjoy how it sounds, let me know in the comments so we can keep the same voice in future videos. The people of Dust Hollow noticed the change, of course. Evelyn's hair was brushed now, her porch swept. She walked straighter, like the limp had lessened. No one dared ask why, but they whispered again. They always whispered. And somewhere beyond the Badger Hills, 50 riders were already gathering, drawn not by vengeance, but by a voice that had once stitched a broken soul back into breath. The wind changed before he came. Evelyn noticed it in the way her wind chime, silent for months, sang a single note as if exhaling. The pines outside her cabin stood a little straighter, and the dust didn't settle right, spinning in small, uneasy circles near her porch. Even the birds paused their morning songs. It was subtle. But after years in silence, Evelyn had learned to feel change the way others felt rain on their skin. She was stacking firewood when she saw him. A figure on horseback, framed between two cedar trunks, just far enough that the morning fog painted him in shades of blue and gray. He didn't move, didn't call out, just watched. Evelyn didn't wave, but she didn't look away either. That night she left her door cracked wider. The next day, the man came closer, riding slow, like he was making sure the earth remembered every hoofbeat. His hat was low, shadowing his face, but she could see his hands, gloved, weathered, respectful. Not twitchy like most men who came through Dust Hollow. Not hiding anything. Just waiting. When he finally dismounted, it wasn't at her gate. It was near the edge of the clearing. He didn't ask to come closer. She appreciated that. "You the one sings out here?" he asked, voice low as gravel, eyes unreadable beneath his hat brim. She didn't answer right away. She wasn't sure if it was a question or something else. "I used to," she said. "Thought so." That was it. No introduction, no handshake. He tipped his head and turned, walking back to his horse like the question had been answered in full. And maybe it had. He didn't come back the next day, or the one after. But Evelyn found signs. A boot print by the stream bed. A small pine cone placed on her porch rail. An Apache ward, if she remembered right. Not a warning. A protection. She began to sing again, softer now, as though the stranger had given her permission she never knew she needed. The third time he returned, he brought tobacco, wrapped in a red cloth, placed it on a flat stone near her garden, then just stood there waiting. She opened her door. "Didn't think white women sang in the old tongue," he said. "I didn't know I did." That earned her a slow smile. Just the corners of his mouth, just enough to soften the line of his jaw. "My mother used to sing that way," he said. "Said the earth listens when no one else will." Evelyn looked at the sky, then back at him. "It's the only thing that's ever listened." They didn't speak much more. He didn't ask her name. She didn't ask his. But something passed between them anyway, like two people carrying fire in their palms, afraid to let it go, but drawn to each other's light. In town, the talk started, like brush fire. Who's that riding up from the Basin Trail? Didn't see him at the saloon, don't drink. Heard he was Apache. Or half. You know what that means. They watched him like they watched everything strange, with narrowed eyes and closed hearts. Evelyn didn't care. She'd already been carved out of their good graces. What more could they take? But the looks lingered. Even the children sensed it. When she walked past the church, a little girl flinched and hid behind her mother's skirt. The preacher no longer tipped his hat. The grocer set her bread down on the counter with a rougher hand. And still the man kept coming. Never too close, never uninvited, but present. She learned his name from a passing cowboy at the well, said he went by Reyes. No one knew if it was his first name or last, just Reyes, meant kings in Spanish, which felt like a cruel joke in a place that bowed to no one. One afternoon he stayed longer. She was shelling beans on the porch when he walked up, nodded once and sat on the stump near the steps. Mind the quiet? He asked. She shook her head. Been living in it too long to mind now. They sat like that for what felt like hours, not speaking, not needing to. And then, softly, like testing the edge of a wound, he said, "You sing like someone who remembers pain, not just carries it." She paused, a bean half open in her hand. "And you look at people like you've seen what they become after." That made him go still, not angry, just still. Then he nodded, just once, as if confirming something she hadn't meant to confess. That night someone knocked on her door. Not Reyes, a different knock. Too loud, too fast. When she opened it, Sheriff Bramble stood on her porch, hat in hand and sweat beading at his temples. "Got a minute, Miss Calloway?" She stepped aside. "I don't make a habit of involving myself in private matters," he started. "But folks are getting uncomfortable. Because I sing. Because a man with no past is spending time on your land." Evelyn crossed, her arms. "Then maybe they should worry about their own houses." Bramble sighed. "This town don't like things it don't understand. You know that. I'm not asking it to understand. I'm asking it to leave me be." He looked around, uneasy. "Just don't be careful. He ain't registered. No known family, no trade papers, came through the hills, that's all we know." Evelyn stared him down. Sometimes the ones with no past are the only ones not chained to it. The sheriff left with more questions than he came with. The next morning, Reyes was waiting by the cedar grove. She walked to him without speaking. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept. "There are men following me," he said. "Riders." Evelyn's throat tightened. "From where?" "From what I left behind." He didn't offer more. She didn't ask. Instead, she touched his sleeve gently. Just a brush of fingers, light as breath. "If they come here, they'll find me first." He met her eyes, and for the first time the man who had seemed carved from stone looked afraid. Not for himself, for her. "You don't owe me that," he said. She stepped back, lifted her chin. "I don't owe anyone anything anymore. And that's exactly why I get to choose who I protect." They sat by the fire that night and she sang again. Not the old songs, not the laments. Something new, something slow and wordless, born from silence, shaped by wind. And for the first time, Reyes sang with her. Low, resonant, in a tongue she didn't know, but somehow understood. In the dark outside, something shifted. The land had listened. And something was riding closer. It began with whispers, as it always did in Dust Hollow. But this time they turned sharp, spiteful. Someone had seen Evelyn in the cedar grove, alone with Reyes. They said she wasn't just singing anymore. She was inviting trouble. That she'd taken in a ghost walker, a savage, a man who never blinked at what he buried behind him. It wasn't about music anymore. It was about fear. And fear, in Dust Hollow, always ended with rope or fire. 3 days passed. The air turned colder. The clouds sat heavier. Evelyn woke each morning with an ache behind her ribs. Not pain, but warning. She felt watched, and this time not by Reyes. He hadn't come since the night they sang together. She wondered if he'd vanished into the hills again, riding into silence like smoke across the pines. On the fourth morning, she found her gate torn from its hinges, just lying there, split clean, as if someone wanted her to know. This was intentional. There were no tracks in the dirt. Whoever did it knew how to walk like ghosts. That evening, she rode into town for flour. It was quiet. Too quiet. The saloon door didn't swing. The general store windows were fogged over, faces ducking just as she passed. Inside, old Harris, the shopkeeper, didn't speak. He didn't have to. He handed her a wrapped parcel, not flour. She opened it right there. Inside, a rope. Tied in a noose, below it a note scrawled in black coal, "No more songs for devils." She didn't speak, didn't flinch. She turned and walked out, but her hands shook all the way home. That night, she sat by the cold stove, clutching the locket that still hung around her neck, the one her husband gave her before he bled out on courthouse stone. She hadn't opened it in years. She did now. Inside was a drawing, not of him, but of her, smiling, younger, eyes not yet dulled by silence. She slammed it shut. The wind outside howled, and she howled back, not with voice, but with rage. They came the next night. 3. Men, faces wrapped in kerchiefs, boots caked in cedar dust. One held a torch. Another had a length of chain. She heard them before they reached her porch. Knew what they were. She didn't run. Not yet. When the first man kicked in her door, she was already at the back window, rifle slung across her shoulder and boots laced. Santin shouted something, a curse, a demand, but she didn't hear it. Not fully. Her blood was pounding too loud. She slipped into the trees and ran. But her leg, the old wound flared, and by the time she reached the ravine, she was half limping, half crawling. The cold bit deeper than it should have. The clouds cracked open, spilling snow into the dark like sifted ash. She slipped, fell, hit stone. The rifle skidded from her hands. She lay there, gasping, throat raw, cheek pressed to the frozen ground, and let it take her. Time passed, or maybe it stopped. She felt herself drifting, not just in body, but in memory. She was a girl again, sitting by her mother's chair as the old woman spun yarn, humming songs in half-remembered languages. She was a bride again, laughing under a veil, unaware the future would take it all. She was Evelyn. Not broken, not shunned, just Evelyn, and it hurt to remember. That's when she heard him. Not loud, not frantic, just a voice, firm and low. Evelyn, her name, spoken like a prayer, not a warning. She opened her eyes. Reyes was kneeling beside her, snow dusting his shoulders, his eyes sharp as flint and full of worry. His hands hovered before touching her, as if afraid she'd vanish if he wasn't gentle. "You're freezing," he said. "Let me help." She tried to push up, collapsed. "I can't," she rasped. "They came. I know." He wrapped her in his coat, lifted her, careful not to jar the bad leg, carried her not like something fragile, but like something worth protecting. She didn't argue, she didn't have to. When she woke, she was back in the cabin. A fire roared. Her boots were off. Her foot was wrapped in fresh cloth, and Reyes sat in the corner, sharpening a blade slowly, deliberately, not to threaten but to think. "You stayed," she whispered. He nodded. "Always planned to." She swallowed. "They'll come back, next time with more fire." "Let them." She looked away. "You can't fight the whole town." "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I'm here to stand." Those words held more weight than any promise she'd heard in years. She stared at him, this man who never asked for anything, who saw her not as broken or haunted but as someone still standing, still singing. And she felt something crack open inside her. A trust. Not born from rescue. Born from choice. Later he helped her to the porch. The snow had stopped. The trees glittered like glass. They sat side by side, wrapped in shared silence. "You scared me," he admitted. "You shouldn't have come for me. Someone had to." She looked at him, really looked, and for once let the silence answer for her. The wind carried ash that morning, not much, just enough to dust the porch rail, to make Evelyn pause as she wiped her hands on her skirt, heart thudding a little faster. Smoke on the wind in Dust Hollow could mean anything. A barn torching, a vigilante cleansing, or the last breath of justice in a town that had forgotten mercy. But this smoke wasn't from town. It came from behind the cabin, where Reyes stood, with his sleeves rolled up, driving fence posts into thawing ground. Evelyn stepped around the porch, narrowing her eyes. "Burnin' something?" she asked. He nodded, not looking up. "The dead things. The brush, the rot. Can't build till it's cleared." She took a few steps toward him, boots crunching the damp pine needles. "So we're building now?" He stopped, finally looked at her. "That's what this is, isn't it?" he said. "You ran. I found you. We stood. That means we build now." Evelyn felt the words settle in her chest like the first sip of something warm after a long freeze. She didn't answer, just knelt beside the stacked lumber and grabbed a hammer. The days turned. Spring crept over the basin like a slow-moving tide. They worked in silence most of the time. Reyes fenced in an acre. Evelyn cleaned out the old barn, the one her husband had left half-rotted after he lost interest in everything but drink and dice. She found tools buried under hay, rusted but salvageable. Together, they pulled tarps and stretched wire and restored what had once been dreamed by two but never realized by one. Now it was two again, not in the way of vows or rings, but in action. He never touched her without invitation. She never asked him to stay, and yet each morning he was there, boots by the door, coffee steaming in the tin, eyes scanning the horizon for more than danger, for meaning. They bought a mare from an old trader out past Whisper Rock, black as pitch, mean as sin. Evelyn chose her for her fire. Reyes said nothing, just nodded as she handled the reins, with a grace that silenced every whisper Dust Hollow had ever hurled her way. The townsfolk watched, of course. They always watched. But something was shifting. Sheriff Bramble rode past one morning and tipped his hat. Not fully, but halfway. Enough to say, "I see you. I don't like it, but I see you." Children no longer ducked their heads. Some even waved. Still, the tension lingered like smoke, in rafters, always ready to flare. And flare it did. It was Reyes's past that returned. Evelyn saw it before he did. A rider on the ridge, tall, bone-thin, face painted in ochre and black. He sat still on a pale horse, staring down at their valley as though remembering it from before it turned to sorrow. Evelyn stepped out onto the porch, rifle at her side. Reyes followed her gaze. He went still. "That's not one of yours?" She asked. "No," he said. "He's one of his." She didn't need to ask who he was. Every man has a shadow. Reyes had outrun his for years. Now it had found him. That night, he told her. He used to ride with a man named Cutter, a renegade war, chief-turned-outlaw, who believed Apache blood should rule every mountain west of the Mississippi. They raided, not for survival, but for pride. Reyes had joined when he was young, angry, looking for a fight that made sense. But the fires they set turned on their own people. Children burned, villages emptied, and Reyes had walked away, not with a shout, but with a whisper. Now Cutter wanted him back, or buried. "There'll be more riders," he said, "and they won't care that you're kind." Evelyn didn't flinch. "Let them come." He stared at her. "You're not afraid?" "I am," she said, "but I've already lost everything once. This time I have something worth keeping." They prepared, not for war, for staying. They reinforced the cabin walls, dug a trench near the back trail. Reyes rode to the basin and returned with 6 riders, quiet men, scarred, respectful, who nodded to Evelyn like they'd heard the songs she used to sing and come because of them. "They're not warriors," Reyes told her. "They're brothers, and they believe in what we're building. So did she. So when she found the old wedding dress, the one they left her in under the broken oak, stained and torn, she didn't burn it. She washed it, then used the fabric to patch the saddle blanket they'd made for the mare. Not all fire destroys, some fire remakes. That night beside the fire, she turned to Reyes. "What happens if we win?" she asked. He looked surprised. "No one ever asks that." "I'm not good at losing." He reached for her hand, slow and deliberate. She let him. "We build more," he said. "A stable, a well, maybe even a school." She arched an eyebrow. "You gonna teach reading?" "No, but I can teach them to listen." She smiled, not wide but real. In the firelight, she leaned her head against his shoulder. No promises, no pasts, just presence. But peace never stays long in stories worth telling. The next morning, Evelyn walked to the river and found a mark carved in the pine. An X crossed by a broken feather. She knew what it meant, even if Reyes never taught her. Judgment rides at dawn. The dawn came cold and golden, bleeding light through low pine and ice-crusted branches. Evelyn stood on the edge of her porch, rifle across her back, the wind brushing her hair back like fingers from a ghost. Reyes was already saddling, the mare. He didn't speak, not at first. They both knew what waited. 20 riders on the ridge, Cutter among them, faces painted in war ink, weapons drawn not just for conquest, but for memory, for punishment. Dust Hollow had emptied, boarded windows, shuttered doors. Only Sheriff Bramble remained on the main road, pistol holstered but eyes watchful, not to protect, not quite, but to witness, to decide whether this woman and this man would be burned off the land, or rooted in it. Reyes tied the last strap and turned. "I'll go down first," he said. "They want me. You don't have to be part of this." Evelyn didn't answer, just took one slow step forward. "No," she said. "I've always been part of this, even when no one saw it." He opened his mouth, maybe to argue. She raised a hand. "Don't you dare protect me from my own choice." They rode together into the clearing just past the creek. The men waiting didn't move. Cutter stood in the center, taller than Stories, wrapped in black wolfskin and smoke. He looked at Reyes, then at her. "You bring the cursed girl," he said in Apache. "The one who sings death," Reyes replied, firm. "She sings life. You just forgot what that sounds like." Cutter stepped closer. "You broke blood to protect her. I'd do it again. She'll bring fire to your people." Reyes looked down at Evelyn. Her shoulders were square. Her eyes were clear. "She is fire," he said. Then he dismounted, faced the town, and raised his voice. "This is the woman I choose." No whisper, no apology. Bramble, standing just behind the line of pines, spat into the dirt. "Well, hell," he muttered. "Guess Dust Hollow's finally got a pair of souls worth keeping." Cutter said nothing, just stared. Then slowly, he turned, and with him, the riders turned too. They vanished into the trees without a shot fired, not because they were afraid, but because something old had been answered. A reckoning, yes, but a reckoning met with dignity. Back at the cabin, she let the rifle fall. He followed her inside. Neither of them said a word for a while. They didn't have to. Later, when the wind died, Reyes lit a single lantern and hung it from the porch. Evelyn watched it sway gently in the dark, like a star that chose to stay close. They stood there shoulder to shoulder. "I could have left years ago," she said softly. "I would have gone with you." She turned toward him. "But I didn't want to leave. I just wanted to stop being alone." He nodded, and this time, he took her hand. Not for protection, not for permission, just to hold it. The seasons turned, and Dust Hollow, slow as an old dog, began to change with them. The mare foaled, a coal-black colt with a blaze on its chest like a burst of flame. Evelyn named it Ash, not for ruin but for what comes after. They didn't marry with fanfare. But one night, under a sky broken open with stars, she wore a piece of white lace tied around her wrist. He kissed her hand, and they danced barefoot by firelight while the world slept quiet around them. And when they had a daughter, years later, small and wild-eyed, Evelyn sang her lullabies that didn't come from hymnals, but from memory, from the trees, from the silence she had once feared, but now had made her own. They named the girl Hope, because nothing else fit.